Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 562XP Mark II chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it just wasn't running right, and in fact we put the saw on the computer and AutoTune was showing an error code. The saw was pressure tested, and it turns out that it had a air leak at the base gasket of the cylinder. So that's where this repair is right now. It was up to the point where all the block off plates are on the saw yet from the pressure testing, and I had to order in a gasket. I think I was out of gaskets. So the gasket came in and we're going to install it. So what I'm removing now is a T20 screw that holds this, let's call it an insulation wall between the hot cylinder and the carburetor area. Keeps the hot engine air off the carburetor. So we got that out of there. Now we're going to remove the anti-vibe mount that's on the handle. Goes into the cylinder. I want to pull the cylinder off of here, and of course that mount can't be on there. Because the cylinder's coming off, I don't want any schmutz falling down near the crankcase. So I'm not going to go out and pressure wash this thing or anything like that. I'm just going to try and do a thorough job of removing any debris that might fall down into there. Around all sides of the base of the cylinder, and anything else loose that's hanging around. Alright, you see down here that it's missing both cylinder screws on this side. And on the other side, the screws are still in there. In fact, this saw is still under warranty, and the gasket and the screws are going to be part of a warranty claim. So I've got the two screws loose. Should have been four. Just grabbing one of them here. Well, come on. There we go. And I'm going to replace all four screws when I put this together. Really now all we should have to do is lift this off of here. And I like to kind of support the piston when I do this so it doesn't flop over and ding itself up. Here's our gasket. The Mark IIs have a different style gasket. It's metal with like a rubberized edge around it. You also notice that there's a couple extra holes in there, and they're for locating pins that are on the crankcase. So you can't put it on there wrong. You don't need any sealant with it. The piston looks good. I mean, yeah, this thing was sucking air, but the customer did the right thing, and as soon as it wasn't running right, he brought it in. He didn't try and, power through it or work it out or anything like that, or do a tuning cut or whatever other stuff you see on the internet. If your AutoTune saw isn't running the way it always ran, then there's probably something wrong with it. You should take it to a dealer, have them check for an error code, because the saws will compensate until they can't, and when they can't, that's when you usually feel that something's wrong. So I'm just going through now and cleaning this base mounting surface on the crankcase. Just trying to clean it up a little bit without dropping anything inside the case. So like I said, this gasket's not going to need any kind of sealer, but you do want the surfaces to be clean. So here I'm looking at the bottom of the cylinder, and I'm just going to clean any schmutz off that might be on there. And you know, we're looking for anything out of the ordinary. I don't expect there to be anything going on here. I mean, 2 screws were missing. The other 2 were not super tight. I mean, I wouldn't expect there to be a crack or anything in the base, but it's certainly possible. So if you can read that, that was the part number for the new base gasket. And I also had the new screws in here as well. Just taking a close look at a fresh gasket here again. It's got that rubberized edge on it. We'll just drop it in over these locating pins, and it'll sit there nicely. Now this saw wasn't dry. These parts, you know, they still had oil residue on them. And I probably could just slap it back together, but it's good practice to at least put a little bit of oil on here when you're reassembling it. And I guess that's about what I'm doing, is putting a little bit of oil on here. All right. So now to install that cylinder over the top of the piston. I mean, you've seen this on the internet 100 times. You need to put a support underneath the piston so that it kind of holds it up and in place, and you can push against that piston a little bit. And then we're going to use this plastic ring clamp and a final look inside the cylinder. Make sure there's nothing in there, nothing that doesn't belong. And as we push the cylinder over the top of the piston, it's going to displace that band clamp, and the rings will slide up inside the cylinder. Sometimes it goes easy, sometimes you got to fight it a little bit. I mean, the trick is you have to make sure that the ends of the ring or rings are centered on the locating pins on the piston. If they're not, you know, obviously it's never going to go together. So we remove the clamp, we remove the support underneath, and now we're going to get that cylinder over the top of those locating pins. I don't quite have it lined up here yet, so I'm rotating the crankshaft and noticing that it's just not right. There we go. So we're spinning these screws down by hand just to get it close. Turning the crank, making sure everything turns free. And then we're going to get our torque wrench out, and my target's going to be 11 Newton meters on this. And I usually take up cylinder bolts in either thirds or halves. So if it's 11, you know, I might shoot for 5 or 6, and then next time around hit the 11 mark. Or maybe I'll go, you know, 4, 8, 11, whatever. In this case, I think I went 2 laps around, so it would have been, you know, 5 or 6, and then the last run up to what should have been 11. But actually, I think the wrench was set at, it says 10.5 and the light's green. So I must have hit the, you know, maybe I was at 10.5 and I made it to 10.5. I don't know. I don't remember. The spec I think is 9 to 11, so we're good. And then just go back through and, You know, did I do a crisscross pattern? No. There I jumped over. But at some point in this pattern, you're not crisscrossing, so it doesn't matter if you do that first or last or whatever. All right, so we got our torque down. And there's only a few things I really torque on these chainsaws, and the cylinder is always one of them. So it should be sealed now. It wasn't sealed when it came in. We replaced the base gasket, and I wish I had the footage of that, but I can't find it. Maybe I just don't remember, but it was leaking something fierce. You can imagine there was 2 screws missing. So I'm pressure testing it right now. And again, some would argue you should vacuum test it first. Okay. But I'm pressure testing it right now, and now I'm going to vacuum test it. And it's going to pass both tests. I'm pressurizing it to 1/2 bar and pulling vacuum to 1/2 bar. You're supposed to, right here, wait 1 minute. Make sure it doesn't move more than like 1 pound if you're pressure testing. And then it would meet Husqvarna's specs anyway. I kind of go on a theory that, you know, tight is tight. If it's leaking at all in a minute, I go looking for the leak. So now that we're happy that it's tight, we can start stripping our adapters that we used, our block-off plates and such. You saw me pull out the adapter in the spark plug hole that I had my pump connected to. Here's the plate. It's a specialty Husky plate. This one has a pin in it that goes in the impulse hole as well. And then a couple of plugs that go in the secondary throttle assembly holes down on the bottom. All right, so we're still going to have the block-off plate on the exhaust we got to remove. What am I doing here? Oh, you know those plugs on the bottom of the intake there, sometimes I grease them a little bit, make sure they don't leak. That's probably why I was wiping my hands off, because there's probably grease on them plugs. So this plate here, custom plate, but it doesn't have to be. You can use a rubber wedge behind the muffler to seal it off. And this is pretty much where we started right here with this insulation wall. So we're going to get this put on. Again, this side's a smaller screw than the other side. I don't know why. It's kind of weird. This one's a T20. The other one's a... You know, I don't know what the other one is. I put a T25 bit in my gun. And that's what I run most of this stuff down with. Even if it's a T27 or a 4mm hex. That one bit seems to work on all 3 of those sizes. And I don't know, I've done pretty good not stripping any screws out. If there's a tight 4mm hex, I'll get the 4mm bit. Okay, our muffler's going to go back on now. And here's another, you know, kind of cowboy maneuver. It's really not good practice to just start turning screws in with the power driver. You know, if you get them started by hand and then use the driver and then finish the tightening by hand, just the driver being the piece that takes up the slack and speeds up the process, that's probably the best, at least if you're a beginner, that's probably the best way to do it. You know, if you do this stuff 8 hours a day, yeah, you take your chances, I guess. There's the one extra screw that we had. All right, in goes our old spark plug. There was nothing wrong with that. And when I said extra screw, that was one of the cylinder base screws. So I guess I didn't lose both of them. I just lost one of them. Or it came in with one missing, I should say. Our anti-vibe spring goes into the cylinder. Again, kind of a cowboy maneuver, starting those threads with the gun. Here, at least, I'm starting the threads by hand. And even looking at what size driver I'm supposed to use. Imagine that. So I'm taking up the slack, and then I'll finish this up by hand. And I don't know what the torque spec is on a muffler. I've never looked at it. My practice is as tight as I can go with a T-handle. They don't seem to come back being loose. And I don't seem to strip anything this way. So that's what's worked for me. Here we go. All four of them are tight. All right, what are we going to do next? Intake. So right there's a rubber gasket. And you'll notice that I'm going to put my finger over that gasket before I hit it with the air. And that didn't work out so good for me. I don't know how I had my finger over the top of it and it still snuck out of there. Luckily, I kind of saw where it went. So I didn't have to go dig one out of a used saw or something like that. So we'll reinstall it. And you know, there's another gasket there. It's on that big oval hole below it. I don't think I've ever blown that one out of there though. And then this intake, there was some dirt in it. So I'm just kind of taking my time and cleaning that up a little bit. All right, an auto-tune carburetor. There is going to be, what am I doing here with the camera?
Scott, line one. Scott, line one.
All right.
Of course.
Okay, auto-tune carburetor. They all got this white connector, at least as of the day of this video coming out. And the white connector snaps into the side of the auto-tune module that's bolted on the side of the carburetor. And if they had just a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch more wire harness hanging out, this job would be a lot easier. But they don't. So sometimes it's kind of a pain in the butt to reach in there and get that thing snapped together. Now, I talked earlier about that block-off plate having a post in it for that impulse fitting. And that's what I was just pointing to, is that fitting is located right below the intake where you see that brass retainer. So we're kind of getting everything lined up. Looks good there. Now my throttle cable, it came out of the holder. So I got to get the sheath of the cable located back into the cable holder. That's what I'm doing here. I'm kind of pushing the cable back into the case and then pulling it back up through the holder. There we go. Now to attach the cable to the carburetor, we kind of just lay it in the groove, open the throttle up by hand, get the ferrule of the cable to drop into the little catch that holds that ferrule. And then when we pull the trigger, it gets sucked down into place. Now that I've got the head on there, I can connect the fuel hose. And this preformed hose, once I get it on there, I can reach down a little bit and there's kind of a shoulder on it. So you can push up on that shoulder without actually squeezing on the hose. All right, those were the two gaskets I had talked about. Now at this point, there's one thing you can do to make life a little easier than what you're going to see in this video. The hose that's kind of coming up through my hand right there, that's the fuel return hose from the primer bulb. You could get that in place a little bit better than I do here. I'm just putting a connector on top of the carburetor right now. So if that hose was kind of laid down into place where you're going to see it end up, that would have made life just a hair easier here. So I'm just getting everything kind of lined up. This wire fits into a little holder right there. And before I pushed it together, I should have routed that hose. And on this side, I'm checking the stop switch to make sure I've got the spring on the right side of the choke lever. And you'll know if it's right if you push down to stop and it's spring loaded. If it doesn't, then you got that spring and pin backward. So we're going to take our T20 and we're going to run these screws in here.
Scott, line 1. Scott, line 1.
I guess first we're going to go take care of some business. Distractions, I tell you what, they've gotten me in trouble here. You know, I'll come back to a project and forget where I was or what I was doing. It'd be easy to blame that hose hanging out there on a distraction, but no, that's just the way I did it. So you see I put the carburetor into that saddle, and there's our spring and our pin that I was talking about. Those are right. There's our other saddle. That looks good. Now I got to feed that hose. It'll go this way. It's just not as easy. So, do as I say, not as I do. And you know, the more I do these, because the Mark I models weren't exactly the same, but they were really close. The more that I do these Mark IIs, it'll come as second nature. And I could have loosened the carb up, but, you know, I'm stubborn. All right, we got the hose where it belongs, pushed on the back of the primer bulb. We got that wire harness in place. Then we're going to attach the hose that goes from the carburetor to the primer bulb that draws the fuel through the carburetor. This connector is the one that goes to the kill switch. It's also connected to the port where we would hook up for connecting to the auto-tune module with a computer. And on goes our air filter and our starter. When I jiggle the handle like that, it gets the starter dogs kind of lined up and allows the starter to drop flush on the case there. It looks good. Gonna need some fuel in here. And this is just Husqvarna 2-cycle oil mixed at about 45:1. And I'm going to top off the oil tank as well. This saw came in with a warranty claim. And it'll go out, you know, with the sharp chain, ready to cut wood. So once I get this oil in here, I'm going to try and fire this thing up. And if it starts and runs and idles decent, then that's all I'm going to have for you in the Husqvarna 562XP Mark II that needed a base gasket and some screws. Thanks for watching. Later.
You look crabby when you're driving to work.
Well, can you blame me? You ought to see me when I'm going home. I got a big smile on my face.
You know, I was going the wrong way.
Yeah,
We were coming
you got to catch me from the other direction.